Thank you for the opportunity to be here to all of the Techqueria team. My name is Melina Acevedo. I am the partnerships lead of Latinxs in sustainability. We're a national nonprofit, and our goal is really to get Latinx representation in the climate space. How do we make sure that Latinx professionals and communities are creating and driving the implementation of climate solutions that affect our communities, and really making sure that we are also receiving the economic benefits of climate solutions, particularly for the clean energy transition. So I will be giving a presentation called Catalyzing Latine Representation for a Just Energy Transition. Let me share a little bit. So today I'll be diving a little bit into, I'll share a little bit about me, my career journey, kind of walk you through an industry overview, describe a little bit about the problem that exists today in the energy transition, particularly in ensuring that we have a just and equitable energy transition. I'll share a little bit about energy justice and some frameworks that we can use to examine, the historic amount of funding that has been going on the last few years for clean energy. I'll talk a little bit about the Inflation Reduction Act and the opportunities that the economic and environmental opportunities that this can have for our community, how to get involved. I'll share some concluding remarks, and I want to leave some time for some Q&A, and then I have some resources, which I hope I can share if it's allowed to share this deck after as well. So a little bit about me. I was born in Lima, Peru. I moved to the States when I was 7 years old. And I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. So actually Richmond, California. I lived nearby in San Pablo, and I grew up next to the Chevron oil refinery, where we had a lot of like spare the air days. I just remember like missing school a lot. And although I didn't know it at that time, and I didn't have the language and the framework to realize it, it wasn't until I was much older that I realized I lived in a frontline community. And I think that experience really shaped my understanding of clean energy and ultimately was like the impetus for my involvement in the industry. So I went to Princeton. I'm the first one in my family to go to college. I studied chemistry and material science and engineering. And at the time, I always knew I wanted to work in clean energy, specifically utility scale solar and storage project development. But as I'll dive into in the next slide, I had a really nonlinear career journey. It really took me a long time after graduation to get to where I wanted to be. But I did it, and this is one of my solar projects one of the first solar projects I worked on in my last job. I moved to New York at the end of November 2022, and most recently, I've been involved as part of Latinxs in sustainability for close to 2 years. So just a little bit about my career journey. I won't share it all, read it all, but basically, yeah, I graduated in 2016, studied chemistry and material science and engineering. At the time, I just like really needed a job. So I joined, obviously being San Francisco, I went back to San Francisco. I joined the tech startup scene in some fintech startups for like the first 2 years. But at the time, I always knew I wanted to work in energy. I joined a solar startup in residential solar to kind of get my foot in the door, essentially, and use that to pivot to another a manufacturer in utility scale solar, a racking manufacturer. It's essentially the hardware that moves the panels when you see these giant fields so that they follow the sun. I spent like close to 3 years there, really got a stronger understanding of like what is project development, sales, how does that all fit in? And I leveraged that experience to join my current job. So outside of LIS, I'm a project development manager at DE Shaw Renewable Investments. So basically my job is developing utility scale solar and storage projects all over the US. And I love it. It's my dream job. It's what I wanted to do at the time of graduation. So I recognize that I had a lot of privilege, right? Even like having Ivy League, diploma and network and all those resources. And even with myself, I had trouble, getting to where I wanted. I think a lot about how other students and young professionals with even fewer resources than myself, like all the barriers that they must face. And that really drives a lot of the work that I do. And along the way, I was involved in a lot of different energy communities and nonprofit professional working groups. I volunteered with Grid Alternatives, Young Professionals in Energy. I did a clean energy fellowship, did a mentorship program with Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability. So I would definitely encourage you all to check out all these groups. I was very fortunate to, I think, receive a lot of support from them, and now I kind of give a lot of that back through volunteering with LIS. So diving a little bit into kind of like, why are we here today? What is really the problem? So ultimately, the US is the single largest historic contributor to global CO2 emissions. This is a chart that shows, I think it's from 1751 to now. And as you can see, the US has played the largest role in global emissions at the time, or since 1751, largely through the Industrial Revolution and then all the development post that. A little bit about just the US industry. So 53% of greenhouse gas emissions in the US come from two sectors. So this is the electric power generation and transportation. And then you have some other sectors that also contribute in there, but are not as significant, like residential and commercial, agriculture. And 21% of electricity in the US is generated by clean energy sources. So that's what we call clean tech. So that includes wind, hydropower, solar, biomass, and geothermal. There's a lot more you can include in there as well. I won't dive into the specifics just because of the time constraints here, but I encourage you all to check out the US Department of Energy, the EPA. They have a ton of resources if you want to really dive into the technical specifications. So just as a high level overview, I'm going to be using this word a lot. So what is clean tech? Just to frame this discussion, we can say it's the use of technology to reduce or eliminate the negative impacts on the environment. So when we talk about clean tech, it can really mean clean energy, clean water, supply chain, built environment, transportation, recycling, etc. So it can be really broad, and if depending on what you look up, like the definitions may slightly change, but ultimately it's really harnessing the use of technology to help the environment. So within clean tech, there are a lot of different sectors that you can look at. So this is a chart showing essentially that interest and investment in clean tech has increased significantly, particularly with the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed in 2022. But you can see just general awareness, government spending for it has increased significantly. So that brings us to like setting the stage where we are today. So as these advancements in clean energy continue, where do Latine and other frontline communities fit in? And the unfortunate reality is that both globally and within the US, people of color and disadvantaged communities are disproportionately impacted by the negative effects of climate change and environmental infrastructure. So due to intentional siting of highways, mining areas, building power plants near our communities, we're impacted by a lot, right? By pollution, high temperatures, harmful waste, everything that has an impact on our health, our community's health. And oftentimes, even though our communities provide either the labor or the resources for clean energy, we receive very little of the benefits of that. So these are some examples. I won't read all of them, but this is really trying to say that the core of the problem is, despite all these advancements in clean energy and federal funding for a clean energy transition, our communities are the most impacted by environmental racism, energy injustices. Black and Hispanic communities in the US, for example, are exposed to over 1.5 times more pollution than is caused by their consumption, which is very problematic. Another stat that I've seen often is that, for example, communities of color and low-income families often pay a significantly higher share of their income in energy costs, for example. So I think something like low-income communities pay nearly 9% of their income in energy costs, which is 3 times more than non-low-income households, right? So I remember growing up, I don't know about you guys, my mom always stressed about the energy bill. So like, and that's just one example of how it's impacting us. And even unfortunately in the workforce, it's also a problem. This is a report from E3. It's literally called Clean Energy Has a Diversity Problem. So what it's showing is that roughly 4 in 10 clean energy workers are from racial or ethnic minority groups. And out of 10 clean energy jobs, only 1 is held by Hispanic or Latino professionals. And obviously, like, I see this a lot in my day-to-day. Like, I'm usually the only Latina, like, in a lot of my calls. I'm usually in like largely white male rooms. And I think this motivates a lot of my work, especially as I've progressed in my career. I just really don't see a lot of people that look like me, frankly. And it's super important, right? Because the people that are that have the decision-making, I just see the comments. I was the only Latina in my environmental course at NYU. Exactly. And that's a problem, right? Especially when you have these executives, they're largely white male, they're deciding what to do in our communities. And we have no one there in the room that actually represents the communities that they're hoping to serve. But in light of these energy injustices, there is hope for a just transition. What a lot of environmental and a lot of environmental advocates and community organizers really look at energy justice frameworks when we talk about a just transition. So just to kind of set the stage, energy justice refers to the goal of achieving equity in both the social and economic participation in the energy system, while also remediating social, economic, and health burdens on communities that have been historically harmed by the energy system. So that is what frontline communities means. So when I said I was living in a frontline community in the Chevron Bay Area, that's kind of what I meant. So energy justice explicitly centers the concerns of marginalized communities and aims to make energy more accessible, affordable, clean, and democratically managed for all communities. And this graphic just shows kind of the origins of the environmental justice, of the energy justice movement. So the origins stem from the environmental justice movement, which started in the 1970s. That kind of later transformed into the climate justice movement in the 1990s. And using those two existing frameworks, now we have the energy justice movement, which really came to light in 2010. And when we talk about energy justice, there are 4 specific concepts that you'll often hear in literature. So there's energy burden, which refers to the expense of energy expenditures relative to the overall household income. There's energy insecurity, energy poverty, energy democracy. And all 4 of those together it's really what we're talking about when we say energy justice. And then when we say just transition, it's really looking at kind of all of those frameworks as a whole: climate justice, energy justice, environmental justice. And you can get super like theoretical here as well. There's the Initiative for Energy Justice is what I linked here. If you're super interested in learning about that, there are whole frameworks that dive into this. But essentially, just high level, there are like a few key distributive and procedural justice frameworks that we can look at when we talk about just transition. So there's the equitable distribution of benefits and harms, which is basically saying that, which is really important because, you know, our communities are disproportionately affected by the harms of the energy system. So it's really, how do we get this to be more equitable? You can look at the economic benefits, which is really important so that disadvantaged communities can have, you know, social, political, economic empowerment through job creation and just control of these resources. We can look at decreasing pollution, which obviously has direct impacts to our health. And what I think is really important is centering frontline voices and control. So really, how do we make sure that we put power in the hands of people that are most affected by decision-making, by policy-making, clean energy, right? Because these groups are the most motivated to responsibly manage the benefits and the risks because we are the most affected. So keeping these environmental justice principles in mind, let's dive a little bit into the Inflation Reduction Act, which I honestly think is probably like the most comprehensive, impactful federal policy funding that we've had for energy in like the last 100+ years. So the Inflation Reduction Act was signed by Congress in August of 2022, and it's really the largest single step that Congress has ever taken to address climate change. The idea is that it will reduce emissions by up to 42% by 2030 through the implementation of this funding. And essentially, the Inflation Reduction Act, the goal is really like, how do we revitalize U.S. manufacturing, really grow clean energy deployments across the U.S.? How do we create, good union jobs with strong pay? It's really the Biden and his administration definitely position it as like, we can have good jobs and clean energy. So it's really looking at that as a whole. And the money moves through a number of different mechanisms, but largely grants, loans, bonds, tax credits and deductions, cooperative agreements, and technical assistance. Grants are largely through state and local governments, other government entities, federal agencies. The loans are largely at the federal level. So the Department of Energy, for example, has a ton of loans that they are seeking applicants for. Tax credits and deductions are largely for project developers, the companies that actually build solar storage hydrogen projects, the manufacturers of these technologies, and consumers as well. Cooperative agreements are normally between like federal agencies, states, other like local governments, and can have private recipients. And technical assistance is largely for organizations. That's the energy justice framework is largely in like technical assistance. That's really important for disadvantaged communities, because think about like the communities that are trying to apply for these benefits. They don't have the resources. Like, it's very difficult applications. It's pretty, not saying it's difficult, but it's definitely you have to go through a pretty thorough process to get this funding, and it's and especially disadvantaged communities need the assistance to be able to like apply, get the funding. So that's the last way that money moves. But essentially, as you can see, we have clean energy tax credits. There's a greenhouse gas reduction fund, residential energy tax credits. There's money for manufacturing. It's really all encompassing. It's literally the largest funding that has ever been signed into law to address climate change. And this provides just some high level overviews of kind of putting into words what this graphic is saying. But essentially, we have the incentives, right, to drive investment. There's an energy justice element to it, and that there are certain bonuses for investing in low-income communities and communities that have historically depended on the fossil fuel industry. The IRA also encourages a lot of project developers to have strong labor standards. So that includes paying prevailing wages or using qualified apprentices. The IRA also lowers the costs of energy-saving property improvements, rooftop solar installs. It also expands the range of actors that have a direct incentive to invest in their communities, because in addition to all of these kind of government groups, you can have nonprofits, other tax-exempt entities receiving the incentives and credits of these projects. And then, as I mentioned, the IRA also prioritizes domestic manufacturing. So there are a lot of resources for that as well. And obviously, when you think about all this money, what does that mean? You need people to actually do this work, right? So it's projected that over the next decade, the IRA will result in over 9 million jobs being created. So, and that's an average of 1 million jobs per year. So this encompasses, jobs across investments, supply chain, transportation, energy efficiency, environmental justice, a ton of jobs, right? And like we said, the clean energy workforce is already underrepresented when it comes to racial minorities. So imagine the importance of making, like, if it's already a problem now, we're going to have 9 million jobs in the next decade. That's a lot of work that we have to do, right, to make sure that we're represented in this workforce and those solutions. So really, what does this mean for our communities? Like I mentioned, the opportunities, environmental and economic opportunities from the IRA are vast. This means healthier communities, more efficient homes, stronger labor standards, a ton of opportunities for workforce development. And in addition to just government entities, we have a number of different stakeholders that can participate and benefit from the IRA. So that includes tribal nations, businesses, nonprofits, community coalitions, higher education institutions. There's actually funding for specifically, for example, HBCUs, minority serving institutions. Like, there's a lot of money here and a lot of opportunities for literally the communities that we represent, the communities that are adjacent to us. And ultimately, the IRA is an opportunity to build generational wealth. The American Association of Blacks in Energy president has a great quote about it. As U.S. infrastructure spending continues to grow and reach needed levels for remediation and renewal, it is imperative that equity is a laser-focused effort to bring historically disadvantaged business owners into the mix. So that ties back to, the opportunities for wealth creation through the IRA. I won't scare you with this, but essentially there's a tracker through RMI that shows you all of the funding. And you can break it down by grants. You can break it down by the entities that are involved. So there's a ton of money. If you want to explore, I definitely encourage you to check it out. And now getting to the crux of it, how do we get involved? And really, why are we here, right? So I think number one, just learn more about energy justice and the IRA. Amplify, why should we as Latino professionals care about this? Help your community, help your family reap the benefits of the IRA, transition into a clean energy job. There are a ton of opportunities, that exist either as a contractor, a minority contractor, or working in manufacturing, development, investments. Literally 9 million jobs, right, are going to be created. So we have to make sure that we are represented there. So for concluding remarks, what I really hope you guys take away is that, one, our communities are the most impacted by historic environmental racism and energy injustices. Because of that, we are the best advocates for ourselves, and we have to play a role in the creation and implementation of climate solutions for our communities, particularly with the funding that's coming from the IRA. Second concluding remark is that, as I said, we have billions of dollars coming through the IRA over the next 7+ years. The funding takes the form of many different of grants, bonds, like I said, many different forms with many stakeholders at play. And this really is our time, right? It's really our time to advocate for healthier communities, for wealth creating jobs. I think literally this is probably the biggest economic opportunity for our community, just given the scale of the funding. And I have some additional resources. I want to save some time for questions. I know we're almost at time, but if you want to learn more about anything that I mentioned, you can check out this IRA guidebook, Just Transition Framework. Would encourage you to check out the LIS network as well, if you want to learn more. Let me see the Q&A. I haven't actually looked at it. 1 second. Okay, as someone who is being newly exposed to the space, are there any resources to follow to learn more in depth? I've always been interested in sustainability and would love to become more informed. Yes, I would definitely say, obviously I'm going to say check out Latinxs in sustainability. Literally, unfortunately, there aren't many Latinx, Latino orgs in this space, doing the advocacy work that we do. But Latinx in sustainability is one, Green Latinos is one. I'm hoping I can share this deck so you can check out the resources, but there are a ton also of climate job boards, even courses that are trying to get professionals to transition into climate and energy jobs. This is a really good guide. So you want to work in climate let's see if I can share it. But basically has a bunch of resources that you can check out that I would encourage you all. Look, it has fellowships, resources just to learn more, has all these communities. The resources are out there. It's really just just how do we raise awareness of that this exists, right? And Kevin, I'd be happy to chat with you as well, individually if you'd like. Any other questions? I know we're almost at time, but. Oh, yes. And Abe mentioned we have another job session tomorrow. So actually, this is one of 2 sessions. So LIS has another session tomorrow, specifically on clean tech. It's a clean tech career panel. So we'll have 2 panelists who work in the clean tech space. They'll talk about, how they got their foot in the door, what their day-to-day looks like, and just really also kind of set the stage on like, what do jobs in clean energy look like? Because it's pretty broad, right? You can have jobs. You can have like certain functions in an energy company, or you can actually be doing that kind of work like at a developer, at a bank, right? So the options are honestly limitless. And yeah, I definitely encourage you all to check out the presentation tomorrow. And I think I'm hoping I can share this presentation as well. So I'll be sure to do that as well with all of you attendees. Awesome. If there aren't any more questions, thank you everyone for joining. We'll be sure to check this, share this deck and the resources, and definitely encourage you all to check out LIS, join our newsletter. We have actually a couple events coming up, so definitely encourage you all to check us out. And thank you everyone again.